So, I'm Justin, the addiction guy. This is the Set Yourself Free podcast. And in this episode, I want to set you free of thoughts that are unhelpful. Bring your attention to the point at the center of your forehead and the point at the back of your head. Where do thoughts come from? And notice the first thought that comes into your mind. Notice the first thought. Notice kind of surround it with awareness. How does it behave? What shape is it? And is what you're thinking about affecting the stress in your body at all? Allow that thought to evaporate into a cloud of smoke and dissipate. Allow your attention to relax the space between the ears, in the back of your neck, around the eyes and the nose. Observe yourself thinking the next thought. And remember to surround that thought with awareness and notice how it behaves differently when you are forcing yourself to be conscious of that thought. Now, take that thought and let it transform into another cloud of smoke, rise up into the sky, and let it go. Come back into your body, into this present moment. And every time you return to this present moment, you can celebrate that. You can celebrate a return to mindfulness. We're going to be interviewing Beau Elkington and learning his story. I met Beau at Alina Health. He was my mental health supervisor when I was logging 4,000 clinical hours for the LPCC. And Beau has quite a story, from finding the art of happiness by the Dalai Lama while he was doing time in jail to becoming a Zen monk. I took one of his meditation classes at Dharma Field, and it was fascinating to kind of witness the world of Zen and listen to them talk about mountains and waters and letting things just be, you know? I've taken all kinds of meditation classes in my life, but Beau's was a very special kind of meditation class. With that, here's Beau.
I don't recall being afraid of substances. I do remember the DARE campaign, where it's like, just say no. And I don't know if that really resonated with me or not, but I did get the impression that, drugs were bad, I did grow up in a home where there wasn't substances, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but it's like, it just was a non-issue. I had the idea that substances weren't a good thing to do, and it just was kind of like I moved on with my life. It wasn't something I thought about a whole lot, to be honest.
What's your first memory of using or getting drunk?
I think the first substance I used was weed, and I got it from my stepdad at the time. For some reason, I was vaguely aware that he smoked weed, and I ended up finding it in our house. And this was during the time of Dr. Dre the Chronic, and so I saw these videos of people smoking weed and doing this stuff, and this lifestyle kind of looked appealing to me, right? And so I was interested. I was curious about this weed, and I found it and smoked a little bit, and it was like, it's fine. I don't think I got high the first time, but it was kind of fun to be a little bit deviant and do something that I probably wasn't supposed to do. And I was like the rappers that I saw on TV, so it was kind of cool. And then I don't remember after that. And then I started, smoking weed on a regular basis at some point after that, and drinking and all that stuff.
So experimenting with drugs these days is much more dangerous than it was in your day, in our day. So I'm just wondering if this question might help us kind of philosophize on solutions here and prevention. And I'm wondering if you think there is a way that your journey with kind of uncontrolled substance use could have been prevented in any way.
For me, when I reflect back on how I went down the path with substances that I did, to be honest with you, it's very much linked with being cool, you know? And so for me, that's more like identity stuff. And I remember at a pretty young age, like 11, 12, 13, feeling uncomfortable and feeling that I didn't fit in. I felt like I did not fit into the crowds of people that I was in school with. I felt like my family life was a little bit different than other people's homes when I would go stay the night other places, you know? And so for me, I think, and I don't know ultimately if this is true or not, but it seems like if I would have had like maybe healthier role models in my life or something like that, you know, if I just had a clear vision of who I wanted to become and who I was looking up to at that point in time, it would have maybe altered the trajectory. I don't know that that's ultimately true though, but that's a suspicion that I have. Other than that, to be honest with you, I don't know what could have been prevented. You know, I think the stigma and the education, the knowledge about addiction might have been helpful if it was presented to me in a way that made sense, you know, at that point in time.
The culture of cool.
Yeah.
Belonging. And so where did your journey with intoxicant use lead you?
Oh, like in the end? Or you mean like...
Sure, you can cut to like worst day of your life.
Yeah. So I got my first... I'm going to just tell you the whole story. I can wrap it up in about 2 minutes.
However you'd like to. Yeah.
So it's like I started becoming intoxicated at a fairly young age, like 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there is when I really started to gravitate towards that lifestyle. And I got my first DUI, driving while intoxicated at the age of 15. I rear-ended a pregnant woman, and I didn't have my driver's license yet. And so it damaged her vehicle a little bit. She was fine. It was like I was pulling up to a stoplight and I rear-ended the back of her vehicle. So it wasn't a major accident or anything, luckily. But I did go to jail that night, at the age of 15, and that was my first experience with the law, or experiencing, a consequence as a result of my drinking. From there, went through a bunch of family stuff at home. Ended up dropping out of high school halfway through my senior year, directly related to my substance use. Joined the military when I was 18 or 19 and thought that was a solution. If I could quit using the drugs, I'd be fine. And this would give me an opportunity to do something different with my life. And so that didn't work out. I spent 2.5 years in the Air Force and got kicked out basically because of drinking. I got a DUI when I was in the Air Force as well. And I ended up getting a general discharge under honorable conditions. And so that means that I lost my benefits of joining the military. I didn't get the GI Bill or anything like that, but I wasn't dishonorably discharged. And so I went back home kind of with my tail between my legs, quit drinking, and I wasn't using substances at the time. But I ended up, that was right at the start of the opioid epidemic. And so I got exposed to these pills that people were using. And I didn't think too much of it. I didn't know how dangerous they were. There was no knowledge about that at the time. So I started using opiates, and ultimately, really that took me. And so I was taking a lot of opiates, Oxycontin and all that stuff. Went to a methadone clinic and was on my way back from the methadone clinic one morning. And my ex-girlfriend, or my girlfriend at the time, went into the woods going like 80 miles an hour. the police said. And I got ejected out the rear window of the vehicle and ended up puncturing my left lung and getting a traumatic brain injury. Was airlifted to a hospital. Was in a drug-induced coma for about a week and a half, and then kept using substances after that because I was prescribed opiates, like what I was addicted to, right? And so I kept using for about a year after that, and I couldn't work. I was, my injuries were pretty substantial during that point. So I didn't go to very much physical therapy. I don't think I did any at all, actually, once I was discharged from the hospital. And then a year later, once I couldn't get opiates anymore, I ended up going back to drinking, and then ended up like a week or two into my drinking again, I ended up hitting a pedestrian with my vehicle. And so the pedestrian broke his arm. He survived. I went to jail, after that, and I spent 4 months in jail. And that's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, I actually had a good experience in jail, which is counterintuitive, but it's because I was ready to make the changes. I was ready to make the changes in my life that I needed to. I picked up the phone to call my dad to come get me out of jail. He said no. Called my mom. She didn't have the money. I forget exactly how it played out, but basically I wasn't able to get out of jail. So I spent the whole time in jail. And what it did is it gave me the opportunity to be away from the substances, and really think about my life and what I wanted out of my life. And so while I was in jail, I had a really important phone call with my dad. And I was thinking about where I was going to go after jail. And I really wanted to go back home because it was comfortable. My hometown, I was familiar, all that kind of stuff. And he made a really important statement to me. And it was like, why don't you consider going to a halfway house in Duluth? You'll get away from your surroundings. It'll just be an opportunity for you to do something different with your life. I didn't like the idea at first, and then I sat with it for a couple of days, and then I just made the decision that, I'm going to go to Duluth, and I'm going to go through the uncomfortability of being in a new town and stay sober. And from that moment on, I just basically made the decision that I was going to do whatever I needed to do in order to stay sober. And every decision that I made after that was geared directly towards my sobriety and what I had to do to stay sober. I just knew that was the one thing that I needed to do for my life if I was ever going to get out of where I was at.
Yeah, I felt that way too. This was like my one major challenge. It's kind of like the final boss. If I can master this addiction thing, then I can do anything with my life. I felt that full potential.
Yeah.
So tell me about your discovery of the book, The Art of Happiness.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So there's a backstory to this, even before the Art of Happiness. That I'll get into maybe in a little bit here. But yeah, I found The Art of Happiness in jail. That was the first book that I asked for, or that I found when I was in jail. I don't remember if I asked for it, if I just came across it. When I made the decision to stay sober, it was like I also thought about the opportunities that I would have with that. And one of the lingering things that stuck with me from a young age is like, I want to explore Buddhism. I want to see what Buddhism has to offer and what it's all about. Out of all the major religions, that one just seemed to resonate with me for some reason. So yeah, I read that book while I was in jail, and that started a long journey of exploration into Buddhism, And before that, the reason why I was drawn to Buddhism was from watching the movie 7 Years in Tibet, And there was a scene in that movie where it was basically about the Chinese invasion of Tibet. And there was this group of American backpackers or hikers that were in that area during the time. And somehow they ended up getting in the community of Tibet, which was closed off to foreigners or outsiders. And somehow they ended up befriending the people that were in this community. And it was just a bunch of monks and Buddhists that were living together. And so it was two American guys that ended up going to this community. And one of the guys was very humble, and was just kind of like a normal guy. He didn't stick out too much. The other guy, who was Brad Pitt, was like the average American person, where you could see he always wanted to be better. He wanted to one up. He had that kind of mentality to him. And they were both interested in the same girl, right? The same woman. And there was a scene where they were like ice skating, and Brad Pitt chose to go out on the rink and like show off and like show how good of a skater he was and that kind of stuff. And the other guy was just kind of fumbling around, and didn't really, he's just doing the best he could. Well, it was interesting to me because the guy who didn't do so well with skating was the guy that got the girl. you know and I don't know why, but that just like really stood out to me as being profound. And what that said to me at that point in time was like, there's a way of life that I could live where I don't have to put on this front, where I don't have to act like I'm the biggest and the best and all that kind of stuff. And there was something about that and the Buddhist community that these guys were involved in that just really drew me to the lifestyle of simplicity. And the more I explored Buddhism from the Art of Happiness, the more I saw that it was, yeah, a part of living, I guess, the Buddhist way of life, if you want to call it that, is simplicity. Like external things, being simplistic. But more than that, it's like a mindset of non-attachment, I guess is what you'd call it. That was really appealing to me. And ever since then, the more I dug into Buddhist philosophy, the more that it made sense to me.
I've been thinking, since I am taking your Zen class right now at the Dharma Fields near Lake Harriet here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that Buddhism is sort of this portal to non-judgmental thinking. And the non-judgment way of living, perceiving, consciously just observing your life has been a huge revolution for me and a huge practice. And in a way, the kind of guys that have to show off and the kind of people that kind of think that they need to prove something or know more than you or whatever that is, and in order to be impressive, they're living within a framework of judgment, of maybe concern that others are judging them. So one must show off. I must prove something to this judgmental world.
Mm-hmm.
So how is Buddhism a portal to through this non-judgment into this kind of way of being with humility that you talk about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say you hit the nail on the head there. I think that was the primary thing for me, is like, and this was a segue to problematic substance use, is like this game that we play where it's like we got to be better. We see it in the commercials, TV, it's all over the place, where we have to be better than we currently are. And with that, for me, came this like identity that I felt like I had to develop in order to get by in this world. And it was exhausting. It was like this alter ego that I had to put out there to show everybody that I was bigger, better, better, and it was a lot of suffering, ultimately, that I came to find out. But the Buddhist approach or the Zen approach to this is like, first of all, one of the pillars of meditation, as I've learned it, is like regularity, sitting on a regular basis, practice with others can be really helpful. And the other pillar of meditation is non-judgment, and but as it's referred to in that pillar model, is non-judgment is like any judgment. It's judgment of ourselves, it's judgment of other people. And when you're sitting in meditation, especially in the beginning, one of the things that comes up is judgment of our practice. So we can judge ourselves for not being present, and getting off the beam with meditation. That's more what that's referring to, but it can be expanded out to just non-judgment in general. Anytime that we're thinking anything really, it's usually a judgment about something. And so that whole conceptualization, anytime that we're caught in our thinking, that is a huge part of the suffering that we experience, and by the way, the Buddhism as a way of life or religion, whatever, getting closer to the truth, whatever you want to call it, it's the first like major religion that I've found where it doesn't turn to something external. You know, it's basically a practice of looking at your own mind. And basically anything that you think is a delusion, which, and I don't mean that in the clinical sense, you know, but so I'm not talking delusion as a clinical term here. I mean, like anything you think is a delusion. And what delusion is, from like a Zen perspective, is like being caught in your thinking, believing that your thoughts are ultimately true and real. And from like a Zen perspective, or any perspective for that matter, is like anything that we think is not ultimately true, because it's merely just a model of whatever you're thinking about. It's not ultimately true, right? And so it's, if anything, like a snapshot or a model of something else, but the thoughts themselves aren't ultimately true.
When you were in early
Yeah.
recovery and you were reading The Art of Happiness and curious about Buddhism, where did that lead you?
First of all, I sobered up in AA, you know, and I just want to give my shout out to AA, my kudos to AA, because what I will say is that it is for sure, if I wanted to stay sober or stay on the beam of recovery, like AA was the spot to go. And I knew that there was meetings to go to. I knew that there was a robust community within AA. And I knew they had some type of solution. And I'm super grateful for that, because when I got out of jail, when I went through a halfway house, that kind of stuff, I started going to AA meetings. And I was heavily involved in AA for years, you know. Eventually, this is about the seven or 8 year mark of my recovery. You know, I actually moved to Minneapolis to practice with my current teacher in Zen, but another side part of that was to go to school. You know, so my main reason was to come down here to practice with my teacher. The way that I was able to do that was through school, to go to school, and it was during that time when I was going to school, practicing meditation in a very diligent way, because I was, working towards ordination and Zen. I just had this moment where I was like, this AA thing isn't really resonating with me like it used to. And some of the core, I want to say like beliefs or something like that of AA is to find a higher power. And to be honest with you, from the beginning, that never really resonated with me. That didn't hit the mark for me. And so I just had this moment where I was like, I just don't know if I can continue saying these things in meetings that I don't actually believe, you know. But at the time, I didn't really know what other options there were for recovery. And I was always told that if you stop going to AA meetings, like, you're not going to make it. So I had this fear in me about trying something else. And so I had this notion that something else probably isn't going to work, but maybe it will. And it was like an unknown to me. Well, at the time, I came across a book. I think at the time it was Refuge Recovery. And this is like this is before the program that I ultimately found, which is Recovery Dharma. But this Refuge Recovery was interesting to me because it was a Buddhist approach to recovery. And it was the first I had seen. And that resonated with me because here I am, very immersed in Zen practice. And here I'm looking for an alternative to AA. And here this program is kind of starting, it's just kind of like getting started. I didn't know of any meetings in Minnesota of Refuge Recovery. I think it came from a different state, California, I believe. I may not be correct about that, but I'm pretty sure it came from California. So what I did is I read through the book. A lot of it resonated with me. It's actually a different school of Buddhism than I practice myself. But nevertheless, I was like, well, it's, Buddhism, it's similar. So it's got enough similarities there to where I felt like it would be worth investigating. So I met up with a couple friends that I had in recovery from AA And we started a meeting, based on refuge recovery. And we just used the templates that they had in that book and the program. And we started a meeting at one of our friends' apartments or condos, and we just kept meeting. And then eventually there was some issues that came about with the founder, the person that wrote the original book. I don't want to get into that. But this Recovery Dharma basically came about from refuge recovery. And so they ended up writing a book, Recovery Dharma, and it was written by, similar to AA, where it's like almost like community based, where there is no central leader, and so it's just a bunch of people that came together and wrote this book. And the program was developed as a program where there's no leaders, and it's I forget the actual name for it, but it's like community based recovery.
Okay.
And so we switched the program from refuge recovery to Recovery Dharma, and now that's kind of the basis of, when I practice recovery, that's what it is.
Yeah, I can relate to that fear of if I leave, and AA is the largest community by far of recovering people from addiction, and it's where you're going to meet the most people, and you just have kind of seemingly unlimited options for meetings all over the place 24/7. But you went off and started your own thing. You kind of were brave enough to go off on your own and find and invite a small group of people to start this whole new culture of recovery. How did that feel at the beginning?
Yeah, it was. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's kind of selfish because I just wanted something different, and that was more in line with kind of how I viewed things, or what was more comfortable to me. And I just happened to be friends with some people who felt similar, and so it was like, it was just nice to be able to be around a group of people that had similar views, not the same views, but similar enough to where we could get along. And being a part of something new is a really important part of my recovery. Getting together, developing, like figuring out the best way to run a meeting, being involved in something like that and getting something started has always been a motivating factor for me. That's not the first time I did it. We started a new young person meeting when I was in Duluth, and that was super exciting. So this was like iteration number 2 of that, community-based recovery meeting development. And so it was fun.
So you like watching a community start to build.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's super exciting. I like being around people that are enthusiastic for something positive, and it's really exciting for me to see people's lives improve. That's more with the work that I do, I think. But in like community-based recovery, it's like when people can come together, have a common goal, a common purpose, and build relationships on that. I think it's super fun to see and be around.
Yeah, that's the frontier. It's like starting a whole new town on the frontier or something. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just got an email back today from a very liberal, open-minded church in Hiawatha that is greenlighting my time slot for Saturdays at 4:30 to start a new Recovery Dharma meeting there.
Yeah.
So they've got a room with a fireplace, and I'm just kind of excited because I've never done something like that before. Just starting a whole new. It's almost like starting a new story, you're writing a new book, and it's a community that will come back week after week. And I've watched other people start those meetings around the Twin Cities, and I've seen the beginnings of that, and it's inspiring to watch.
Yeah, it's fun to be a part of, it's a fun journey, the whole recovery thing. And I think starting new meetings and doing new things like that is really helpful for people's recovery. Just to be a part of something, like to know that you're developing and building and like contributing to, it's like that part of recovery is super important.
What is Recovery Dharma, and like how can people find it?
I would say Recovery Dharma is like a Buddhist approach to recovery, just to put it simplistically. And so where they can find it is online. You just type in Recovery Dharma, Minnesota. You can hopefully find meetings. I know that Recovery Dharma has a main website where they list all their meetings. There's also a Facebook page, Recovery Dharma Twin Cities, that people can request to join. Anybody's welcome to join. And just word of mouth, knowing people, I know a lot of people that I talk to, especially in the work that I do, are very interested in trying it out, and I don't think I don't want to give the impression that Recovery Dharma is the end all be all to recovery. It's an avenue for recovery that people can explore. If it resonates with you, that's awesome.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview, folks. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe and share with anyone who might benefit from the knowledge shared in this podcast. If you would like to ask a question for me to answer in future episodes, you can email me at setyourselffreepod@gmail.com. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Have a good one.